What is your personal horrific experience? Hey guys, if this is your first time on our channel, I'm Em, and I'm here to bring you guys some spooky stories. To anyone returning, thanks for coming back, and I hope you all enjoy today's video. Story 1. I've always been an extreme sports person ever since I was little. Mountain climbing, parasailing, scuba diving. Though I've always been an avid skier. I go upstate skiing at least 10 times a season. Sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. My friend, who I'll call Kier, agreed to come up and go camping with me so we could do some backcountry skiing, which is basically skiing in the backcountry on marks or on patrolled areas outside of a ski resort's boundaries. It was a 3-hour drive, then a decent amount of off-roading to get to where the hills were. I parked my truck at the bottom of a decent-looking area full of hills. But I also stopped there because I couldn't really drive out much further given that there were too many trees. Kira and I then proceeded to unload the back of all of our stuff, including ski gear and hiking equipment. Then we hiked about a quarter mile, which was an incredible amount of work, with all the stuff that we were carrying. We found a perfect place to set up camp right near the bottom of an uphill, and in a bit of clearing between the trees. Setting up the tent and unloading our sleeping bags and equipment and such was our first priority. When all that was done, we started our hike up the hill to scout the area. We did a decent amount of hiking, but we also got a lot of skiing in. At one point, he and I lost each other while skiing down a bigger hill. I assumed I'd meet him at the bottom or just find him eventually. I checked the walkie-talkie just to see if he'd answer, but he didn't, which meant he was probably still going downhill. At some point while I was walking with my skis at the bottom of the hill, I ran into someone, another skier. He sounded very friendly under a ski mask, asking me where the best hills are and if we were camping and such. He had his skis strapped to his orange backpack. I pointed to the hill I just skied down and also pointed in the direction we set up camp. He said he and his wife were trying to find a good place to set up camp near other people and asked if I could lead him to my campsite. As much as I really didn't want to trek all the way back there, I felt that I had to be a good Samaritan and help this man and his wife. I pulled out my walkie again and set into the speaker to cue that I was going back to the campsite for a bit. I started to lead the man who was behind me. Suddenly, I started getting some static from another end on the walkie. It seemed someone, probably curious, was trying to talk to me, but the connection was crap. Nothing I could do about that except for coming back to the hill afterwards. It took a decent amount of hiking and small talk with the man before we reached the campsite. I turned around to him and smiled under my ski mask, which I realized instantly was pointless. He sounded very thankful for him and his wife. Then I finally asked him, "Where's your wife?" He didn't answer. He started to walk closer to me. First I thought nothing of it, but for some reason, something about his skis and backpack just struck me. They belonged to Kier. First lit second I thought, is this Kier? Is he pranking me? But it wasn't possible. The voice was too different from Kier. The man was a few mere feet away from me at this point, and he was picking up the pace to a more intimidating approach. I panicked and jumped into the tent to dig for my flare gun in my bag. The man grabbed my leg, which was sticking up from the tent, and then I felt a sharp, intense tangle in my leg, like a severe electric shock, followed by a burning heat feeling. I screamed in pain as I just managed to pull out the flare gun, push aside the darts of the tent, and aim at the man. He immediately backed up with his hands in the air, and that's when I noticed the knife dug deep into my leg. I ordered the man to tell me where my friend was. He answered quickly, saying near the bottom of the hill he found me at. I told the man to stand still while I called 911 to request an immediate rescue, but the man took off quite easily while I was on the phone. There wasn't much I could do with one single flare gun shot. I felt like I was waiting there in the cold with my bleeding leg forever, until finally, the reassuring sound of a rescue helicopter swooped overhead and I shot my flare gun. I cannot believe I was actually picked up by a helicopter. I helped locate my friend lying in the snow in the middle of the hill. He was unconscious and he'd also been stabbed twice in the leg, then robbed. He tried talking to me through the walkie-talkie while he was losing consciousness, but the connection was bad. We both went to the hospital, but we're fine today. OP, I literally felt like I was watching a thriller movie while reading this, constantly trying to figure out if your friend was gonna be okay. Obviously, I know you were, since, you wrote the post, but I wasn't sure how I wasn't gonna end up for your friend. The genuine luck and intelligence you had not to send off the one flare until a chopper came by, and that they were able to find you, just honestly amazing. I hope that they were able to catch the guy, but I know realistically that there's no way they could have. Story 2. I grew up in California for the first 14 years of my life. Our neighborhood wasn't the best, namely because it was an area that the Crips were known to reside in. If you don't know, the Crips are members of one of the biggest Los Angeles street gangs. My best friend, who I always called Stevie, lives 2 doors down. We had other friends, of course, but we would often hang out just with him and I. We usually ride our bikes together around town or play video games, just basic kid stuff. When we were 12, we were biking around the neighborhood one night and decided to visit a well-known abandoned house. It had been uninhabited for many years because no one would buy it for whatever reason. When we pulled up on our bikes to the front of the house, Stevie pointed to the window and said, "Look." I pushed my bike a little closer to the window and focused my vision on it. I could see someone peeking out the window. I couldn't tell if they were looking at us or not, but it was definitely a person's face sitting between the curtains. It was extremely strange considering the place had been unknown for years. We stared for longer than we should have perhaps and noticed something else that was strange. The person didn't move their face at all. We inched a little closer onto the empty driveway actually. Upon getting closer, it appeared to be a Halloween decoration or something like a fake head. This meant someone had snuck into the house to put it there. Stevie and I, being the mischievous kids we used to be, hatched an idea to sneak through the back somehow and check out the place. We hid our bikes on the side of the house behind an overgrown bush, then snuck into the yard. To our surprise, the back door was already unlocked. But when we came to think of it, it wasn't that surprising considering it seemed someone had already broken in to put that fake head there. We stepped into the house, but we didn't want to turn the lights on and expose the fact that we were in the house. It was dark in there, but not pitch black, so we could make our way through the house. We got to the living room first because we wanted to check out that fake head thing at the window. It smelled really bad in that room though. I picked up the head from the windowsill and immediately dropped it and screamed. I dropped it not because it was surprisingly heavy, but because it also felt like real skin. I saw a dark liquid pouring out from the bottom of the head that was not on the floor. It was blood. It was a real human head. There were 2 cracks in the ceiling above us. Stevie and I looked at each other with our mouths hanging open. We ran for the back door and got back on our bikes to get the hell out of there. Anyone in our immediate area learned pretty soon that the head belonged to a victim of the crypts, who apparently placed the head there as some kind of message. I don't think anyone knew the full story, but there was a good chance whoever placed that head there was still in the house. Because Stevie and I both heard cracks in the ceiling above us as if someone was coming downstairs. Another story where the genuine luck of some of these Redditors is incredible, and I'm very jealous. I think I'm lucky if I find a parking spot within 1 mile of my apartment, and these people are making it out alive or avoiding killers. All jokes aside, I hope maybe this was a bit of a wake-up call or a reminder not to go explore abandoned places. And if things start to give you a bad feeling, just get the heck out of there as fast as you can and don't look back. Story 3. I used to babysit in my teenage years. When I was 14, I babysat for a 6-year-old boy named Cody once. His parents left me with a few instructions other than to order a pizza for dinner and not to let him go in their room. They also left me with an interesting comment that Cody tends to act differently than other kids and that he'll talk to himself or his imaginary friend, especially when he plays with his toys. So it was midday pouring outside. I was watching some old Wipeout show that was on TV in the early 2000s. Cody was on the floor playing with his toys that were scattered across the living room. Cody kept using the name Agnes. He would act like he was playing with another kid who was sitting in front of him. One of his toys that was sitting across the room from him activated out of nowhere. I only found it weird because the toy was one of those cube-like things with the crank, where you pull it down and some simulated moving, racing background came up on the screen. It was the kind of toy that would take effort to activate, and there it was, activated all by itself. I asked Cody how that was possible. He looked at me and said, "Agnes is playing with it." I have to admit, it was a little disturbing hearing him say that. Picked up the toy and turned it off. That night in the final hour waiting for his parents to come back, I was in the bathroom washing up when there was a knock at the door. "Cody," they said. I opened the door. Cody wasn't there. I looked into the hallway for Cody. One of the doors at the end of the hall started to creak open slowly, like really slowly. I turned off the light to the bathroom and walked into the room expecting to see Cody playing around trying to scare me. Instead, Cody was sitting on the bed in the far corner of the room looking at me. I asked him who just pushed open the door. "Agnes," he said. Now truly freaked out, I went to pick Cody up off the bed and brought him to the living room where I spent the rest of my shift until his parents came back. I didn't mention any of the weird things that happened, but when they reached out to me to watch Cody again a few weeks later, I never called them back. Story 4. Last year, a guy came to my house's door around 9 p.m. He knocked on the door, so I got my mom and she went out to see who it was. By the way, we live in a rural area, so visits that are later are extremely uncommon and strange. The guy talked to my mom about how he was opening a business and if she liked American-made products and why. Then handed her a Clorox container as a sample. He went back to his minivan and opened it to get a quote-unquote vacuum cleaner. And my mom saw 5 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get my phone phone, since we don't have a landline. I couldn't find it, so I got my knife and stood around the corner. She threw the container outside and told them to get the hell off her property, as well as that she was calling the cops. They peeled out of the driveway and we never saw the car again. It took me a little bit to get this, and when I did, my mouth literally dropped in just true fear. My guess is that the Clorox had chloroform on it, and when the mom took a sniff, she would pass out, and then that seller dude would essentially be able to rob her, or much worse. Some of which I don't even want to think about. I am happy your mom saw the guys in the van and was able to put the pieces together before things took a turn for the absolute worst. Story 5. Nothing to do with paranormal or anything, but it was an experience I had while living with my father, who is a recovering hardcore alcoholic. My whole life knowing him, he's been on hard liquor and had trouble quitting. He would often get put into rehab and I'd be sent off to different caretakers. Some were pretty abusive. So in an attempt to keep me from being sent back to the abusers, he tried quitting without rehab. He also worked at a Salvation Army, so if he got caught drinking, he'd be fired or something like that. He lied a lot, so I never bothered asking. This was the first time I ever seen someone have serious withdrawals and didn't understand what was happening at the time. The first stage, we were eating at an event held by the Salvation Army with other recovering addicts, and he couldn't get the food into his mouth. His hands were shaking so bad. He just left his food alone after several attempts. He was very irritable while sober, and it only got worse. The second stage, I was woken by him talking to the neighbor for a very long time. He held a full-blown conversation, but nobody was there. I rolled over and asked him who he was talking to, and he said Carol, who was our next-door neighbor. At first, I thought he was on the phone, but he wasn't. The third stage was by far one of the worst. We were sitting outside late at night by the apartment swimming pool, and my dad was looking at the trees. He said, "Do you see them?" "See what?" I asked. "The bobcats in the trees." He was literally having hallucinations and was serious about it. He saw other stuff too, but that's all I remembered out of it. The final straw was one day he decided to hop on my bike to grab something from the store in the morning. He made it about 20 feet from the front door on the bike and fell over and knocked himself out cold on some stairs. I was too scared to come outside. Residents of the complex helped him out. He was totally out of it, had no idea what was going on. I was only 15 and never seen my dad act this way or get hurt even. He was a mathematical genius and electrician journeyman, and seeing him go through all of this was horrific. He was sent to the hospital for a long time and I had to stay with a friend. My dad kept drinking after that and ended up passing away 7 years later from liver and kidney failure. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.